to help protect each other. So please, wash hands, cover face, make space.
Yes! No. Yes!
It's not easy being special. To be special, you need to be consistent. I've been special in Milan, in Madrid, but not all great achievements get trophies. Be humble. Special never brags. But the truth is, we are all judged on results. See? Special.
Not really, mate. Someone wins a jackpot every single day. It's daily.
The Daily Jackpot on Paddy Power Games. If you win, don't think you're special.
The perils of gambling.
I was hooked right away. It was like the handbrake was off and I just couldn't stop.
If I had money in an account, I couldn't sleep at night because I knew it was there and I had to lose it all before I could sleep.
You just think, what have I done? I've just spent a month's wage on nothing and I've not got anything to show for it.
We hear from young people battling addiction. Good evening. For most people, putting a bet on is a bit of harmless fun. But for thousands of others in Scotland, gambling is a crippling addiction. With COVID restricting people to their homes, regular gamblers are upping the stakes and spending more time and money online. Charities are warning financial distress, isolation and boredom are a recipe for disaster. Our reporter Emma Cameron has spoken to some young Scots battling to regain control of their lives.
It's really easy to place a bet these days. You don't even have to leave the house. For many people, gambling is just a pastime, but for thousands in Scotland, it's an addiction. There's shame and secrecy, and it can be difficult to reach out for help. Jennifer is only 24. She started online betting when she was just a teenager.
It started off as a fun thing. I'd seen an advert for it basically and I thought, I could do that, and heard about people winning big. I started off just putting in a wee tenner here and there, but over the years it got to a point where I could put in up to £1,000 a day. Over a course of 5 years it just spiralled into an addiction.
And how has lockdown made things worse for you?
I was in the house a lot, so having it so accessible on my phone, I would just go and put in a tenner, £100. No matter how much I won, it was just the chase to get all the money I'd lost back. I lost a lot of emotions when I was gambling. I was so depressed, I was suicidal, it was horrible.
What did it take for you to get the help that you needed?
Eventually in August, I realised I just had a serious problem. I knew I had to get a hold on it because I had nothing left, not even to buy a can of juice from the shop. It was which is like 50 pence, and you're like, I have nothing. I've got nothing to go out for lunch or enjoy life. So I'm 24, I should be going out, enjoying my life and meeting up with friends. Eventually I told my mum and dad, which was really, really difficult for me, but I was lucky enough that they can support me financially and emotionally. They were brilliant.
Jennifer turned to Gamblers Anonymous for help.
I think without them, I don't actually know where I'd be. I probably wouldn't be here because that's how low I was feeling. That's how bad I felt.
Paul Pettigrew placed his first bet at 18. It all started as a fun night out at a casino with pals.
I won quite a bit of money, probably about £1,000, and I was able to come down the road and buy new clothes, help people out. I would say that I was hooked right away, to be honest. I loved the competitiveness of trying to win. I loved the thrill. And I knew very early on that it was something that I felt really attracted towards. Had it been alcohol that I felt so strongly about, then I would have probably got help quite early on because I was aware of the dangers of alcohol, but not of gambling.
When did you realise that you had a problem with gambling?
It got to the point where all my money that I was earning was going towards gambling, but also I was starting to borrow money. Mentally, I was completely and utterly miserable. Every single day I was waking up knowing that I was going to gamble, but not actually wanting to. And that's where helplessness starts to set in. And that all happened like within a year. It was like handbrake was off and I just couldn't stop.
At one point, Paul had racked up debts of £30,000 and his addiction took its toll on his mental health.
I just thought, this probably is going to end up taking me and I'm not going to get out of the situation I'm in. I'd given up, but I thought at least my family deserves for me to fight back a wee bit. I went maybe a day without gambling, which to me was like a massive step. I remember the first day that I didn't. My brain was just going overload. I really feel like I was in withdrawal. I was sweating, I was shaking, and it was a horrible experience. But when I did eventually get some sleep and I woke up, I thought, right, well, it is possible. And things didn't immediately get better from there, but it gave me a bit of hope that I didn't have before.
Paul's parents have been supporting him throughout his recovery.
Once we found out where it was, I thought to myself, my God, this is terrible. This is just taking a life from him. It's really devastating.
But as parents, you never want to see your son struggling, do you?
No. You're just watching a boy deteriorate, and there's just nothing you try and look online for things, and you try and kind of look for help, but there isn't any help.
All we could do was just try and keep him close, encourage him and tell him that he was a good boy before he was gripped by gambling, and he can get back to being there again.
It was a difficult process, I won't have a lie about it. There was a lot of hard days, hard nights, a lot of tears.
Colin is 28 and has been battling gambling addiction for over a decade.
I was outside the bookies on my 18th birthday, and I just remember blowing all this money and not knowing how to tell anybody that I'd done it. And that's when it kind of spiralled, and obviously online gambling was big at the time. I knew I was really, really compulsive when I started to walk or run to work just so that I had this money which was meant to be spent on train fare. I used to blow my wages in one day and then I'd be an emotional wreck.
So you kind of spent all your wages in one day, and then what did you do for the rest of the month? It didn't mean that you didn't gamble for the rest?
No, I would always get bailed out by family members or I would take out loans and pay them at the end of the month. I was always lying about it. I was in the bookmakers before work in the morning, and it got to the point that the people that worked there would be like, look, you're always in here. Umpteen times they gave me leaflets and stuff. Back then it felt like my safe place, which in reality, when you look back on it now, it really wasn't.
Whenever you fell off the wagon, if you like, you fell hard.
Yeah, you could say that. Debt get bigger, life problems get bigger, and I didn't deal with life problems, just let them fester in my head. I was basically having to use tablets to sleep at night. If I'd have been gambling during the day and I had money in an account, I couldn't sleep at night because I knew it was there and I had to lose it all before I could sleep. I started to get very shaky, very sweaty, and if I didn't have a bet, I was actually taking no well. That's how bad my addiction got. You just get into this rut where nothing else matters apart from getting this bet.
When did you feel you're most at rock bottom?
I would probably say that was just at the end of lockdown. I was just totally drained, totally tired. It just beat me emotionally and mentally. I did research about the best way to kill myself, just because life had got so much for me. I just didn't think there was any help or hope out there, and I just wanted to end my life.
There is a way back from gambling addiction, and support is out there from charities like Gamblers Anonymous. With help from his family and GA, Colin hasn't bet in 5 months.
For me, I've just got a clear mind today. That's the best thing. Having money in the bank's nothing to me. Having the love of my family today is probably the biggest thing GA's gave me. Having people that I love saying that they're proud of me. I've not had that in years.
Now I'm just excited for a future without gambling and to have mental stability and the finances to do what I want.
Last month, Paul set up a supportive community on social media for other young gamblers. Paul's story inspires others to open up and connect, with almost 100 people coming forward in just a few weeks.
GamTalk was something that, to be honest, I probably had already thought about while I was still gambling towards the end. I thought, how could I have walked so blindly into a problem like this and I knew nothing about it? It needs to be treated in the same vein as alcohol and drugs. It can be just as destructive and it needs just as much help to stop it.
Well, joining us now is Professor Gerda Reith, a sociologist specialising in gambling and addiction. And here in the studio is former gambler Martin Paterson. Thank you both for joining us this evening. Martin, how did you get into gambling? How bad did it get for you?
Yeah, thanks for asking me on it. It got bad to the extent that people just spoke about their own roulette machine especially. Gambling was a lot slower then, and then when the FOBT machines, the roulette machines, were introduced to the high street bookmaker, everything went at a fast pace, and that's why they were known as the crack cocaine of gambling, because once you get a couple of sessions or a couple of spins on them, you were more or less hooked instantly.
And what hooked you?
The speed, the pace, the dopamine rush in my mind, whatever it was. I'm not too sure at that particular time, but it was the pace of the game had sped up from the usual 2-3 minutes, whatever it was.
How much money did you lose, and what did that cost you? Not just in material terms, but in emotional terms.
Well, I was a taxi driver at the time, so it was pretty basically every day or every couple of days, and I couldn't put a figure on it. But what it did do was take everything I had time-wise away from the people that I was supposed to care about. You were there, but you weren't there. You were consumed in all these gambling thoughts and how you were going to start chasing your losses. And every day was a struggle, as people have said on the clip there. Every day was a struggle to avoid this.
And Gerda, is this a similar story you hear what Martin's been saying there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all the things that your interviewee said and that Martin's just repeated are things that I hear all the time, and particularly things like chasing losses, early wins, and the terrible impact on mental health. This is across the board, and gambling is well known now for being the mental health problem with the highest rate of suicide of mental health problems. The rate is 15 times higher amongst people with gambling problems than the general population, and that's a staggering figure. And the kinds of things that your guests were talking about are the kinds of things that drive people towards this state very quickly as well.
So what help is out there, Martin? I know that there are NHS clinics in England specifically dealing with gambling addiction, but none up here.
Yeah, there's a few. I think there's 13 or something across England, run by the NHS, Matt Gaskell. And there's nothing in Scotland. I mean, people will get recommended to Gamblers Anonymous, which is a great first step. If anybody's struggling, that's the first place to go, is open up and get to a Gamblers Anonymous meeting.
Gerda, what support is there out there for people that you would recommend?
Well,
and what more should there be?
Unfortunately, if you live in Scotland, there's very little. And there is some treatment in England, but even though it exists, it's not a particularly robust system. I mean, it doesn't have particularly good coverage. I don't mean that the treatment itself isn't effective, but it's not particularly extensive. And what there should be is obviously a national system so that everyone can get the help they need wherever they happen to live in the country. But also, more importantly, I think prevention is often overlooked. It's far more effective and also far cheaper in the long run to stop people developing problems in the first place, rather than to try and treat them once they've developed these sometimes quite intractable problems.
Yeah. Well, talking about prevention, Martin, the UK government is carrying out a review into the Gambling Act. In the last few years, quite a lot has been done by the government. There's a ban on credit card use now, and they've reduced the maximum stake on fixed odds betting terminals to £2. I mean, it was £100 before. What more do you want to see?
Well, there's no limits on online roulette. It's the Wild West. I mean, if you want to bet a horse or a dog or whatever, they'll take 50, 100 quid. But you go into that machine and they'll take everything you've got. There's no limits on it. There's no affordability checks, unless you might be lucky enough to be taking it back out the other way. That's when they ask you about affordability checks, when you're trying to reclaim wins. And they'll keep you there for 4 or 5 days so that you'll go into the casino, because that's where it's limitless. There's no regulation whatsoever. It covers it. There's no ombudsman for any redress. There's no complaint system. It's just a shambles. The 2005 Gambling Act is needing updated badly.
The gambling companies are, heavily promoting responsible gambling now, and they do voluntarily contribute to a gambling charity every year. I think it was 10 million they contributed last year. But sponsorship as well is a concern of yours.
Football, you just need to look at Scottish football as far as sponsorship goes. I mean, Scottish football's addicted to the gambling industry. I mean, Daffabet, Celtic, Rangers is 32 Red, William Hull, the National Stadium, Betfred Cups. It's a saturation of glamorising a product.
But Scottish football chairman would say that they'd really need this money and they need the sponsorship money. It would leave a massive hole if they didn't have it. But Gerda, what do you think would be very helpful, going forward in the future in terms of reforming the Gambling Act?
Well, I think you need to start at the top. I mean, to help people, you need to look at gambling as a supply side issue rather than looking at the demand problem. So you need a really thorough review of the gambling legislation in this country, because, as Martin said, since the Gambling Act in 2005 became law, we've really had an uncontrolled experiment in gambling expansion, and it's seen advertising, marketing, sponsorship, faster and more intensive high-speed products, tactics that the industry use, which are deliberately designed to persuade people to gamble, to get them to gamble more, not to stop, and to keep them playing essentially until their bankroll is run out. It's been described as addiction by design, the way that they use products and tactics and fast games, sophisticated technology and really fast technologies and